last week, a bill was introduced in Congress by Adam Schiff, AOC, and Donald Norcross to make striking workers eligible for unemployment insurance nationwide.
Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
Last Week in Southern Labor is a segment where we talk about what workers were up to in the South in the last week, because workers don't get enough love in the media. We're always doing stuff, always winning elections, winning strikes, winning bargaining, and sometimes losing, and it's important for folks to understand what's going on. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into the new election filings for the last week. The employer filed for a union election after a majority of the 21 workers at Starbucks in Atlanta, Georgia showed support for unionization with Starbucks Workers United. 6 workers at Lincare Incorporated in Wheeling, West Virginia filed for a union election with the Teamsters, Chauffeurs, Warehousemen, and Helpers Local 67. 3 workers at Johnson Controls in Springfield, Missouri filed for a union election with the United Association of Journeymen and Apprentices of the Plumbing and Pipe Fitting Industry, Local 669. That's the UA's Road Sprinkler Fitters Local. 4 workers at CMI Management in Quantico Base, Virginia filed for a union election with the International Union of Operating Engineers, IUOE, Local 99. 72 workers at Centerpoint Energy in Byram, Mississippi filed for a union election with UA Local 619. 36 workers at Patriot Plumbing in Winchester, Kentucky filed for a union election with UA Local 452. 14 firefighters at L3 Harris Technologies in Greenville, Texas filed for a union election with the United Automobile, Aerospace, and Agricultural Implement Workers of America, otherwise known as the UAW, Local 967. The employer filed for a union election after a majority of the 21 workers at a Starbucks in Denton, Texas showed support for unionization with the Starbucks Workers United. 11 workers at Grant Makers for Effective Organizations in Washington, D.C. filed for a union election with the Service Employees International Union, SEIU, Local 1199. 11 security guards at Garda World Cash Services in North Charleston, South Carolina filed for a union election with the Security, Police, and Fire Professionals of America, SPFPA International Union. Anti-union workers at Black Hawk Mining, LLC, Glancy Surface Mine in Wharton, West Virginia filed a petition to decertify the United Mine Workers of America, UMWA, Local 1503, as the union representing the 88 workers there. 2 workers at the FedEx office in Austin, Texas filed for a union election with the Lone Star Labor Education Union. Never heard of them before. Anti-union workers at Valero Services in West Memphis, Arkansas withdrew their petition to decertify the United Steelworkers International Union as the union representing the 7 workers there, so the USW will remain. 2 workers at Children's National Hospital in Washington, D.C. withdrew their petition for a union election with the D.C. Nurses Association, as did 8 workers at L&W Supply Corporation in Karnes, Tennessee. They withdrew their petition for a union election with the Teamsters Local 519, and this happening only 1 week before the election was scheduled. 27 workers at Swissport Fueling in Fort Myers, Florida, withdrew their request to amend the bargaining unit there. And in election results, anti-union workers at Max Finkelstein LLC in Winchester, Virginia filed a petition to decertify the Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union as the union representing the 500-plus warehouse employees and drivers there. And before getting to the election, the union filed a disclaimer of interest with the NLRB in which it, quote, waives and disclaims any right to represent the employees. It seems like the union thought the election was heading to a pretty overwhelming no vote, but a shame to see them surrender nevertheless. 6 workers at Given Glass and Glazing in South Charleston, West Virginia, voted to decertify the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades, IUPAT, District 53, as the union representing them. And 81 workers at Pepsi Beverages North America in Collierville, Tennessee, voted to keep the Teamsters Local 667 as their union in a decertification election. 8 workers at Cisco Louisville in, you guessed it, Louisville, Tennessee, voted in favor of
Louisville,
unionization.
Kentucky, you mean, right?
Louisville, Kentucky, sorry. In Louisville, Kentucky, voted in favor of unionization with the General Drivers, Warehousemen, and Helpers Union, Local 89. 9 workers at SSM Health St. Louis University Hospital in St. Louis, Missouri, voted in favor of unionization with SEIU Missouri-Kansas Division. 9 workers at Blue Sprocket Pressing in Harrisonburg, Virginia, voted in favor of unionization with the Teamsters Local 29. 329 workers at Lockheed Martin in Lexington, Kentucky, voted in favor of unionization, 156 to 133, with the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, IAMAW. That's a big win. Union Rights for Security officers won a runoff election after none of the 3 unions vying to represent 67 security guards at Centera Group in Washington, D.C., got a majority in the first round in August. 600 workers for the city of Richmond voted in favor of unionization with the Teamsters Local 322. This is the first time that any union has represented Richmond workers, and is the first time that they have held an election since collective bargaining became legal in Virginia in 2021.
Hey, 5 seconds. Just wanted to say that this is only possible because of our donors. If you want to see more of this, then consider donating yourself at tvlr.fm/donate.
There's quite a few updates around strikes and bargaining. The NLRB found that the National Autobahn Society has violated labor law during negotiations with its union employees, represented by the Bird Union, CWA, by refusing to bargain over mandatory subjects of bargaining, by unilaterally imposing changes, by denying union members benefits given to non-union employees, and failing to disclose relevant financial information to the union. Negotiations have been going on for 18 months. Amazon Teamsters have extended their strike from California to Georgia last week, and Memphis soy protein production workers with the Bakery, Confectionery, Tobacco Workers, and Grain Millers International Union, BCTGM, Local 390G, have been on strike since June. The 4,000 UAW members at Mack Trucks continue their strike, as do UAW members at GM and Stellantis. UAW members at Ford have a tentative agreement, and reports are that GM is now matching Ford's wage proposal, so we could be seeing tentative agreements coming at GM and potentially Stellantis soon. Shangri-La dispensary workers with the United Food and Commercial Workers, UFCW Local 655 in Columbia, Missouri, are still on strike. They began in May. And Three Brothers coffee workers with UFCW Local 1995 in Nashville, Tennessee have been on strike since June. There's a few updates in policy, politics, and legislation, where last week a bill was introduced in Congress by Adam Schiff, AOC, and Donald Norcross to make striking workers eligible for unemployment insurance nationwide. Receivers of billions of dollars in public money from the CHIPS Act have nevertheless been found to have very exploitative labor practices. That's why last week a community coalition sent an open letter to the CEOs of beneficiary companies calling on them to uphold the standards recommended in the act. From the Alabama Reflector, the end of the COVID emergency will mean a 15% cut in the Alabama Department of Human Resources, DHR, funding in the current fiscal year due to declines in federal funding. In internal union affairs, after an election complaint was filed in the officer elections for the Machinists District Lodge 19, that is the national division of the International Association of Machinists that represent railroad workers, the Department of Labor has now ordered a rerun of the election, date to be determined. Palestine was reportedly a hot topic at the National AFL-CIO Executive Council meeting last week, and it was reportedly dominated by a 30-minute anti-Israel monologue from the president of the American Postal Workers Union, who described himself as, quote, an anti-Zionist Jew. The presidents of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, the Laborers International Union of North America, and the International Union of Operating Engineers signed a national tri-trade solar agreement governing the construction of utility-scale solar projects, making it easier for developers, contractors, and unions to bring critical renewable energy generation online to power America's communities. That's a very exciting development. And that wraps it up for last week in Southern labor. Pittsburgh Dude 87 says maybe the Lockheed Martin union can shut them down to avoid sending more weapons over abroad. That would be great. I'm not totally sure if they'd be on board with that. But the ILWU has done stuff like that in the past, and very, very cool of them to do that. Infinite Content says, hey, SEPTA's union has a tentative agreement to avoid a strike next week. Very, very good. Pittsburgh Dude 87 says, whatever standards are recommended regarding the CHIPS Act versus required, you can be sure that corporations will take the cheap, exploitative way out. And that's exactly the issue with the CHIPS Act. And we have had reporters on the program talking about the labor exploitation that companies are doing with our money from the CHIPS Act, because they are not required. These standards are not required. They are only recommended. And that's the issue with all this money that is, flooding the court in the semiconductor manufacturing industry. The argument against requiring it would be that it would make it too onerous, and that these companies might not choose to create semiconductors in the United States at all, which is firstly a dubious argument. I doubt it. If you give companies enough money, you can saddle them with whatever requirements you want. But even if that were the case, we could just do it as the government. I mean, there's absolutely nothing stopping the United States government from standing up operations and manufacturing semiconductors themselves, other than, a lack of imagination and neoliberal brainworms.
You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.